Okay, so I'll start today's session. So basically today there'll be two parts to it. So the first part will be on how to plot your charts and format your charts. And then we'll take a break. Then the second part will be on some questions to summarize whatever that we have gone through for the past few sessions that's relating to valuation. So we'll more on like DCF kind of questions. So we'll discuss them later. Then after that, then you all will be continuing with your group reports on whatever that you all have yet to finish. So that's the rough outline for today. So yeah, this is the outline. So I think I'll just start off with what exactly is some of the commonly used charts. So I think you all should know the very basic example, like why you even have charts and so on. So I'll start with what type of chart to select first. So if let's say you are going into your report or your slides or whatever, then when you want to insert a chart, then what you will see is that you'll typically have some so you will typically see this screen, then there'll be different options for you to choose, like column, line, and so on. So I'll first explain like what each of these charts are supposed to be used for. So for example, if you want to look at a pattern across a period of time, like for example, if you want to look at your revenue over the past few years or something along these lines, then you would use like line chart, column chart, and area chart. So all these, right, what you'll get is that on the x-axis, right, is basically your time. So for example, like your 2020, 2021, and so on. That's on your x-axis. And the vertical axis, the y-axis, you want to show your variable that you're trying to display. So like your revenue or net profit and so on. So can someone tell me, right, what's the difference between a line chart and a column chart? I mean, the name itself says one is line, and one is column chart. When you try to dig deeper, right, which one you use? Because I said that if you're trying to look at time series, you can use any of these three, right? But what do you think is the way to differentiate between choosing line and column, for example? Okay, but then in this case, you are still going to have the same result, right? So for example, you can see the thing, right? Yeah. So for example, if it's like a line, right, then it's just like this. Whereas is for column, right, then you have something like this. So at the end of the day, you're still showing the same thing. But what's the difference between these two options? Okay, because you have one individual column, is it? Okay. Correct also. Any other alternative point of view? The column is better for they compare more than two companies. We are going to do a stack column. Yeah. Okay, but you can also do it with a line chart, like with two different. Okay, can also. I think for that, line chart can still be done, right? So for example, let's say you got two companies, and you are trying to show the difference in values. You can still have a black color for like company A. Then the other one you have a different color chart for like company B and so on. So it can still be done in terms of trying to compare one company against the other. But what is fundamentally different between these two charts is somewhat related to what James has said earlier. It's okay. Later we'll come back. Then I'll show you an example to illustrate this. Okay, so the second part is showing relationship between variables. So for example, you have to show your variation multiple against your margins or growth rates or whatever. So if you're trying to compare like these two quantitative variables, right? You can use a scatter plot and a bubble chart. You all know what is bubble chart? Okay, so the normal, I think you all should know what is scatter plot, right? I think you all have done it in class 105, is it? Yeah, so the traditional one, right, is your standard scatter plot. Then it's just two variables like your x and your y. Then you'll draw like a regression line or something. So that's the first one. Whereas for a bubble chart, like it's still the same. It's still x against y, but then now you have a z. So your z, right, will be the size of that that dot on the chart. So the typical scatter plot is just put one dot, one dot, one dot. Whereas for this, right, the dot will differ in size. So it can be a small dot or it can be a larger circle. Then maybe over here is like even larger circle, for example. So basically what you're trying to show, right, is you're trying to show three different variables inside one scatter plot. And then the size of the x of the z variable, right, is depending on the value. So for example, in this case, like, if you're trying to show this sort of chart, right, then what you can do is to have example your margin. And then on the y is your multiple. And the z will be your, let's say, market cap. So you can illustrate very clearly, right, that there is a relationship between having better margins, which also relates to having a better multiple and having a larger market cap. So what you can roughly tell from this, right, is that, for example, let's say Nike. So you can say that, oh, because Nike is the market leader, yes, also then intuitively as the largest market cap, and then it also is a much more efficient in terms of production, hence the better margins. And then because it's a market leader, it's being priced at a premium compared to other companies. So this is something that you can tell, right, when you use a bubble chart to illustrate these different points, instead of trying to do like two different charts side by side, and then you compare, let's say, the multiple against the margin and the multiple against the market cap. You can use one chart to encompass all these three different variables. And then, so the third one is basically a bar chart. But you all know what's the difference between a bar chart and a column chart? Both are basically the same, but one is vertical, one is horizontal. So basically for the column chart, right, this is what your chart will look like. Okay, whereas for the bar chart, this is what the chart will look like. So it's the same thing, right? No matter what you look at it, it's just whether you look at it horizontally or vertically. But what's the use case between these two types of charts? Yeah. So basically, this is more for time series. The column chart is more for time series, where there's some form of a time progression. Whereas this is for you to look at different maybe not say time series variable, but more of like company A, B, and C, for example. Or you can look at different product types. So for example, like product A, B, and C, what's the revenue contribution? Whereas this one is more of a time. So why do you think that people use column chart to represent like a time series? Why can't we just use this or the other way around? Less of a like half correct. So basically your natural reaction, right, when you look at the chart, right, is that you assume that the horizontal axis, right, is to show some of the time difference. So whether you look at it in terms of like in this case, or whether you look at it in your financial statements, it's always the columns will be arranged in a chronological order. So that's why it's more intuitive, right, for people to read and understand a chart when you put your time as the X variable, and then the other Y variable is your revenue or whatever, instead of doing it the other way around, because it's very confusing. So that's the somewhat like psychological reason, right, for people to use a column chart for time series, and then for a bar chart to compare across a non-time series. Okay, so the fourth type is to show the breakdown of a whole into different parts. So okay, so maybe I'll ask you guys, what's the difference between a bar chart and a pie chart? Can you like use one to sort of replace the other in a sense? Giovanna, what do you think? Can we use one to replace the other? Why not?
Pie chart is longer.
Okay.
Bar chart is harder to convey.
Okay. Anyone agrees or disagrees?
I would say I disagree because if let's say you want a pie chart and you want to compare against different competitors, let's say their revenue contributions, then it will be quite tricky. It's not easy to see. But if you let's say use a bar chart with 100% range, right, then you can see how the breakdown was between different competitors, like how the revenue contribution of percentage.
Okay. Okay, so the short answer is that you can use a bar chart to replace a pie chart. Okay, so basically what the difference is that for a pie chart, right, you're always showing as a 100%. So you can't compare, let's say like Nike and Adidas, then you plot into a pie chart because you are going to miss out the other competitors. So it's always like, let's say, like this, right? Then it's quite obvious that this is your market leader. Then this is probably the second. Then they are going to make up like the third, fourth, fifth, and so on. But what happens is that in this pie chart, right, it's going to look very messy because they're going to have a lot of different variables, like in a sense. So another easier way to do it is to use a bar chart to show the same kind of info. So in this sense, right, what will happen is that you just add in more values over here. So what you're still trying to show, right, is that at the end of the day, right, the so-called market leader, right, is still this company because it has the longest bar length compared to other competitors. So you can also use this, right, to show, to sort of like compare against the top few companies in terms of revenue or whatever you want to look at, if you don't have the entire data for the entire market. So for example, you're trying to plot a bar chart, you have to look for Nike, Adidas, Puma, Under Armour, and whatever nonsense in order to get this pie chart. Whereas for this, you can just take Nike, Adidas, Puma, and then you can just stop there. And to still illustrate your point that, hey, Nike is still the largest in terms of sales. So that's what you can use a bar chart to sort of replace a pie chart. And then usually in the industry, they prefer not to use pie chart because it just doesn't look very good and then it's prone to mistakes. So for example, right, what could happen for a pie chart is that you can put a pie chart and then here you are going to put 40 and then you're going to have 30 and then so on and so forth. But then you did not convert all of these, right, to a percentage of the entire sum of this entire pie chart. So that's why sometimes you'll see that when they plot, like, some of the values are wrong. So you can actually go and Google on I think there was one from CNA or Straits Times. So they actually mess up the chart values and then they are showing the numbers inside the pie chart, but then the size of the pie chart at the angle, right, it doesn't correlate to the actual sort of market share that they are showing. So that's another thing that you all have to look out for when you're going to do a pie chart. Okay, so in terms of the rest, sunburst, tree map, and waterfall chart, so can someone roughly explain like, what is a sunburst chart? Or anyone can look at your Excel or PowerPoint, they click the more charts, then look at sunburst chart and try to figure out what it's trying to do.
It's like break down the many pieces of the pie chart, right? Make them.
Yeah, okay, so it's sort of trying to showcase a breakdown of that, for example, like your revenue streams, like into more into smaller segments. So for example, right, if your company has 2 segments, then what you would show, right, is that and what you'll show is that you'll just do like a pie chart. Then let's say this is product A and then product B, for example. And then you can do another chart that shows this is A for local sales, and then this is A for overseas, and then B for local, and then B for overseas, for example. So what you can do, right, is to sort of combine these 4 segments into one singular chart. So what they will do is that they'll start off with 1 layer first, and then so this will be A and B, and then they'll put an outer layer, and then they will show that this one is local, then it's overseas, and then same for this. So you can use a sunburst chart to sort of show this relationship, or you can use a donut chart, and then you can put another another outer layer onto the donut chart to sort of have the same effect that you're trying to show. So actually, I've never used a sunburst chart before, but I've done the donut chart for 2 different categories, like a breakdown of some sorts. You all can look at the Beyond Meat report on the website for an example. I think it's on the 2nd page. So for the 3rd one, macro chart or tree map. So basically what it does, right, is that it's trying to show, it's basically trying to break down the whole into different parts. So what it does is that it will just give you like a square or rectangle, and then it will break down this rectangle into different sections, and then basically the size of that smaller box, right, is the contribution towards that entire part. So for example, for this, right, is your revenue for the entire box. And then when you break it down to different parts, then you have this from customer A, and this from customer B, then this customer C, and then D, and so on. So basically, it has the same form of effect as your traditional pie chart or donut chart, but it's just a different way of representing it, where a pie chart will use a circle, then they'll cut down into different parts. Whereas for a macro chart, it's basically using a rectangle, then they'll cut into smaller slices. So the size or the area of each of these boxes, right, is just to show the contribution from that particular customer or segment. So again, right, is to note that the amount contributed, right, is shown by the area. So it's the area of this. So it's like you just take your length times your height. You don't take like the width or what, because you're still going to look at the entire rectangle on the whole and look at the area. So for example, if this entire thing is 100 million, and then this customer D is 10 million. So you should expect, right, to see that the area of this box, right, it should be 10% of the entire square. So that's what you should look out for, to show that this is actually 10 million out of 100 million. Okay, and for the fourth one, waterfall chart. So what is the difference between using a waterfall chart compared to the other three options? Like in what scenario will you use a waterfall chart? Because all these four are still somewhat trying to show a breakdown of your whole into different parts, right? But what is different about a waterfall chart compared to the other three? One, Samuel, what do you think?
The chart.
Okay.
And then for the rest,
Yeah. So basically, what Samuel says is that for waterfall chart, you can show whether it's an increase or decrease. Whereas for the rest, you can't afford to do that because it's just one absolute number without any difference in positive or negative. So typically, what we'll do for waterfall chart, right, is that, for example, if you're trying to do a breakdown of your net profit, then first you'll start with your revenue. Then your next item will be example like your COGS. Then what you are going to be left with, right, is sorry, not like this. Okay, then what next will be your COGS. And then what you'll be left with after that is your gross profit. And then you're going to have your OPEX and so on and so forth until you reach your net profit. So this is in a sense for you to visualize how you sort of where is your cost coming from and which area or which segment is more expensive for the company to run and so on. So you can use this to look at net profit, or you can use it to look at net profit to free cash flow, for example, where do you all still remember how to get to free cash flow from net profit? Anyone recalls? Or anyone recalls what your cash flow statement looks like? Lucy, do you remember what's inside your cash flow statement?
Fine.
Okay, what is the first line in operating cash flow? Yeah, because each of you just, so now you said the three segments, right? The operating, investing, and financing. But what's the first line inside operating cash flow?
Net profit.
Okay, and then after that?
yeah.
Okay, Ryan, do you remember what's after net profit in the cash flow statement? Okay, Chelsea, after that? Okay, Samuel, do you remember what's after you add back D&A in the operating cash flow? Okay, not long. After that, Giovanna.
Don't do that.
Okay, so basically, if let's say you're trying to do net profit, also you can see or the thing is to like
I think a bit like
oh
just like I remember here. That's what I do, right?
okay, let's try this.
Oh yeah. Wait, look at the financial, of course you know lah, kanina.
Okay, so net profit to free cash flow. So basically, you'll start with your net profit. And then after that, you'll add back your D&A. And then you'll add back your interest. And then after that is your working capital changes. So whether it's up or down or whatever it is. So let's say it's down. And then after your working capital changes, then what's the item after this? Yeah, so after this, then you'll get your operating cash flow. Operating cash flow. Okay, so basically your OCF, right, is going to be about this height. Okay. And then after your operating cash flow, what else do you get? You get to your free cash flow. Okay, specifically which item in investing? Okay, maybe I backtrack one step. Chelsea, what do you understand from cash flows from investing? Like, what does it mean for that investing cash flow section? Depends. So, what do you expect to see inside that section? Like, what are some common items that you will see inside? Sorry? Payments for what? Okay, so you said buy new equipment. Ryan, what is the name of that item that she has just mentioned? Yeah. So basically what the main item inside your investing cash flows is, at least for the forecasted period, is your CapEx. So CapEx, is it positive or negative? Samuel, is CapEx positive or negative? Okay, good.
So give us the financial.
So after this, then basically what you are left with is like your free cash flow, where typically you just take your operating cash flow minus your investing cash flow, then you'll be left with your free cash flow. But this is not the same as the FCF that you typically think about. It's just purely from the cash flow statement. You just take your OCF minus ICF to get your FCF. So this is what you can use, right, to sort of visualize how to move from net profit all the way to your free cash flow and so on. Or it can be from EBITDA to free cash flow or whatever that you're trying to look at. So in short, this is what you can use, right, to show how each item affects your company's, be it like net profit or cash flow metrics. So in short, this is a summary of these different types of charts. Okay, so some other not so commonly used charts is like your radar charts. I think you all are somewhat familiar with this. You all have seen it quite a few times for, usually they use it for like quarters, 5 quarters and so on. And then football field chart also. So it's basically basically like a stack bar chart where used to show different valuation range. And you can also think of it in terms of a box and whisker chart, for example. But it's not so common outside of banking. Like people wouldn't understand what it means if they haven't really seen it before. And then you can also use histogram and box and whisker charts. I think you have seen this in your BUS 105. And then you can also look at tornado chart. So basically it's trying to show different variables, like the impact on your share price or whatever. So typically you will start from, so typically you have this line in the center, right? And this one is for positive changes and then negative changes. So for example, let's say your revenue, right? You plus or minus 5%. Then what's the impact on your target price? So for example, this could be, I know, plus 20%. Then the other side is also plus, it means it's a minus 20%. Then maybe the next item is your COGS. Also plus minus 5%. So maybe for this would be 15% impact. And then same for the other side. Then next would be your, I know, like your staff costs, interest expense, and so on. So it's basically trying to show like out of all the different variables, like which one will really drive the value of the business. So you can look at it to see like which variable, right, is the most critical inside your entire assumptions. So I mean, inside your DCF, there'll be a lot of different assumptions, right? For example, even the amount you spend on CapEx or the useful life of your PPE or your inventory days and so on. But which one is the most critical or core to your entire assumption? So you can use this to check which are the more important variables and which are the ones that you sort of have to stress test more in a sense. Okay, so can someone tell me, like, what is wrong with this chart? Anyone can point out what is wrong? Chelsea, do you still recall? You were there, right? For the CFA finals. Can you tell me what is wrong with this chart? Do you recall? No? Ryan? What is wrong with this? And it's not because the picture is blurry, I think we far behind. So the picture is not very sharp, but you can roughly tell. But what is wrong with this whole chart? No. I mean, just look at it, you can roughly tell. Susie, do you guess what is wrong? Not about the content. Okay, so basically what is wrong? Yes, Simon, you want to try? Not really. So basically what is wrong is that this is a very lazy attempt at plotting the chart. So basically what you'll get, right, this exact chart, right, is what you'll get, right, when you click insert chart in your Excel. Then you just copy and paste without editing anything. I mean, they added in the red color box, but okay, that's beside the point. So basically, right, whenever you see this color scheme, right, I'll kill whoever shows me this chart because you have not done anything to format the chart. So that blue and that orange and that gray, right, is that default Excel or PowerPoint chart color. They'll always give you this standard chart color. So one look, like, you can tell, right, that whoever did this, right, is a amateur and it's not, as basically it's just a lazy bum one because it doesn't take a lot of effort to change the color. So some guidelines for chart formatting, right, is basically, firstly, right, is to maximize your data to ink ratio. So can anyone, what do you all understand from the first line? What is this data to ink ratio? I think I've shared about it before, but I don't think anyone has watch the video that I shared. Anyone can understand what is data to ink ratio? No? Okay, so there's two parts to it, right? Firstly is the data that you're trying to show across. And secondly, right, is the amount of ink that you use inside your chart to show this info. Okay, so for example, right, your standard chart, let's say you're trying to show the revenue across a time series. Then over here you have your years. And then you're going to have your FY20, FY21, FY22. And then revenue, let's say US dollar million, and then 10.00, 20.00, 30.00, all the way until 80.00. And then you're going to have one chart over here. And it is 27.56. Then next year you have 41.55. And then 67.69. So what is wrong with this? Oh, I forgot to add. Then you're going to have your grid lines as well. So what is wrong with this chart?
If you show the number in the city, kind of don't need the website.
Okay. What else? What is the data that I'm trying to show you guys in this chart? It's just the revenue, right? It's what is really key, right? It's just this thing. This, and this, and this. So the rest, right, you can remove one. Okay, so you can remove your grid lines. You can remove your decimal place because I don't really care what is that decimal place. It's not that important. Although in some cases it's important, but later I'll get onto that. And then actually all these, right, you can just remove all these stuff over here. And then you can just put millions. So straight away, right, we are going to remove a lot of extra ink that you are using inside the chart, but it doesn't value add to what you're trying to show. So basically what it does, right, is that it's just cluttering up the entire chart, but it makes it look very messy, and then it distracts the reader from looking at it. And then second thing is to simplify your chart. So don't show too many things or variables in one chart. So I've seen some people like they put like 4 or 5 variables in one chart. So for example, like this revenue, then they'll put like COGS, for example, or gross profit or whatever. And then they're going to show EBITDA margin. Then they're going to show net margin, operating cash flow, and so on. So when you add so many things into one chart, right, it's very hard to focus on what exactly is the key takeaway of your chart. So are you going to tell me that, top line is growing, or are you going to tell me that the company is more efficient because the net margin is improving, or because of the free cash flow conversion, or what? So what exactly is the key message of the chart? So I'll recommend for each chart, right, to have not more than 2 variables. So you can put a combo chart with like 1 column chart and then 1 line chart for whatever margin or what. And that's about it. Don't try to go beyond that. If you want to show more things, right, then you make a new chart instead of adding in more and more variables. Then the third thing is basically to standardize the color scheme. So inside the report, we've already given you the color palette to use. So just follow that. And then the fourth point is also related to what I mentioned, to remove your grid lines and labels and whatnot, because it's going to add even more distractions to your chart. And then the fifth point is just to look at your charts after you've done it, and then you think about what can you remove. So for example, whether at first it's like 27.555, then does it make sense to remove that extra 2 decimal place, or to cut down to 1 decimal place, for example? So these are all your things that you should look at after you are done with your chart. So 6, we'll just do it live. Okay, maybe we just play spot the difference first. So can someone tell me, right, what is the difference between the first and the second chart? So again, this one comes back to the question that I posed earlier. What is the difference between a column chart and a line chart?
One is
No shit, Sherlock. Thank you.
better.
Can someone tell me, like, what is the key message that I'm trying to tell you using the chart?
First one is very nice.
No. What am I trying to tell the reader when I show them this chart? What should be the takeaway that comes to your mind? Sorry? No.
That the GDP per capita is okay.
Yeah. So basically, what I'm trying to tell you, right, is that 1960s, right, until now, right, Singapore has gone through an astounding growth in terms of GDP per capita, where at the start it's basically 0, and now it's basically 73,000. So the overall picture, right, is to tell you that you are starting at nothing, then you are now at a very high level. So that's the entire message behind the chart. And then now you look at it deeper, right? So one look at okay, so who thinks that the first chart is better? Okay, then the rest. Who thinks that the second chart is better? Then the rest that never raised hand, not decided. Okay, never mind. Okay, so basically, right, the first one, right, is the standard Excel output. Then I did the second one to make it better. So Alvin, maybe you can explain why do you prefer the first one instead of the second one?
The first one is more specific. But
Okay.
I know the data is very good, but let's say you want to explain like a drop, the top bubble drop, then you can zoom in into the example. Like very nice or what on. But the bottom graph it's just like a range that you cannot really go in depth on. So I feel like top one is better.
Okay, sure, not wrong. But then you're trying to think back to the underlying message that you're trying to convey, right? So is there a point or is there a need for such in-depth when you're trying to look at, 2000 is a .com crash and so on? Because you can roughly tell by looking at the chart, like the line, that you can see like, this is 01 and then 08 as a crisis, so it's somewhere roughly here, which somewhat correlates to what we are showing inside the data. But it doesn't detract away from the message that they are trying to bring across, which basically that Singapore has grown a lot in the past 6 decades plus. Okay, so basically what I've done, right, is that I've removed the grid lines, the first thing. I've changed the chart color. I've changed the chart type from column chart to a line chart. And then on the right side is I've simplified the axis values. For example, you see that on top here is 10,000.00, 20,000.00, but there's no need to do that much because no one cares about whether it's 0.00 or what. So you just show in terms of thousands. So just convert the amount to thousands and label your chart title, 10, 20, 30, and so on. And then in terms of the x-axis labels, it's also the same thing, where on top here, right, it's going to be very distracting because we're going to show every 2 years basically. And then it doesn't value add to your chart. So what I did is to change the x-axis labels to every 10 years. I mean, you can do every 20 years or what, but in terms of a time series for a long period of time, 10 years is a good sort of interval to use because it's more intuitive. And then typically for your axis labels, right, is usually in terms of 5 or 10, or perhaps for larger scales, it can be 20, 25, 50, 100, and so on. So it's always at a intuitive number, not like a 30 or something like that. So it's always in terms of like in multiples of 5 or 10s basically. And then basically I just put a label at the very last scale. So that finally we are at 73,000 GDP per capita. So this sort of gives some context to the reader if they want to look at the current value, or if you are presenting and then people ask you, So what is the current GDP per capita? And then you have to think back or look at your sources. Is quite troublesome. So usually for the current one or the latest one, I'll just put a label over there. But again, it depends on the context and the usage. Okay, so the second one, what is the main difference for this?
Let's do the comparison.
Okay, so basically the same thing, right? I'm just showing the same data, but in a different format. So the left side is a column chart, the right side is a bar chart. So I mean, I did the second one. So basically what I'm trying to show, right, the underlying message, right, is that Singapore is basically fourth in ASEAN in terms of GDP. And then Indonesia is basically the leader in ASEAN region in terms of the GDP output. So basically what I've changed, right, is firstly the chart type, the color scheme. And then in terms of color, what you can do is to highlight what you're trying to showcase. So for example, you're trying to highlight Singapore. So you change Singapore to a different color. So straight away one you can tell that, oh, this is a different color. So they'll pay more attention to this particular value. And then basically for this, you can tell quite easily that Indonesia is basically 2 or 3 times larger than the rest. And then for the rest, there's not much of a difference between the next 5 countries. And then after which the other countries are quite small in comparison to the rest. So you can roughly tell that there are 3 sort of groups where the first group is basically just Indonesia. Second group is the Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, Vietnam, and Philippines. Then the third group is Myanmar, Cambodia, Laos, and Brunei. So when you look at this, they'll also be able to tell what is the relative difference between Singapore and Indonesia. Right? Basically, Singapore is a 400 billion GDP, and Indonesia is about 1.2 trillion. So it's basically about 3 times larger than Singapore. So that's another thing that they can be able to judge by the size of the bar and the value over there. And then in terms of the axis labels, I just put in terms of 500 because it doesn't really make a difference whether it's like 1,000, 1,100 and so on, because what I'm trying to show is the overall size of the economy. And then all these small intervals, it doesn't really make a material difference to what you're trying to show them. So for this case, I just put in intervals of 500, where it's easier to read and make a sense of. Any questions? Okay, so the third one. Okay, so for this, right, what do you guys think about this chart on the left? Okay, apart from that. What is wrong with this chart?
Why is
Okay.
I think one thing could be the colors, because there are too many colors in the chart. So
Okay.
it's quite different.
How long? Okay, so with respect to the chart title, right? What am I trying to tell you guys from this chart by showing you this chart? Okay. And
The bodies are
okay, so what do you think is wrong with me choosing to use a column chart to tell you that the margins are improving?
so you calculate margins is relation to revenue. So
Yeah.
the revenue increase, right? Then you see like
Yeah, so actually in this case, right, I can tell you that, hey, you look at gross profit, EBITDA, and so on, they're all increasing year on year, but you can't really tell what's the margin like unless you do the math yourself. Right? If you look at, for example, 2022, top line is about 900K and gross is about 200K, so it's about 67% gross margin. Unless you do the math yourself for every year, it's quite hard to tell. And then basically what I'm showing is that I'm showing 5 different variables for each year for the past 5 years. So another thing to consider, right, is which of these variables are redundant, or what can I remove and still tell people the same message. So now it's much simpler, where I take out a lot of variables, for example, EBITDA and EBIT, and I just show them my revenue, gross margin, and net margin. And now you look at it, right, this chart actually tells a very different picture where if you look at the left chart, right, it doesn't tell you what exactly is the margin. But now when I do a line chart, you can easily tell the gross margin declines from 72% to 67%. So in that case, right, I'm actually telling you a lie using my first chart. But I'm telling you that the margins are improving. But actually, if you do the math, you can easily tell that the margins are actually declining on a year-on-year basis. So that's why it's important, right, to always choose the correct type of chart to show what you're trying to tell, basically. So actually, you can, if you use the wrong chart, people will not understand and they will not be able to, and they might even get the opposite conclusion of what you're trying to convey to them. Okay, so I think you can open the Excel, then I'll just run you guys through how to create these types of charts. By the way, the Excel file is from the Telegram channel. You all open the Excel already? Okay, so this is actually the 3 charts that I went through in the slides. I don't want to run through too many charts because the underlying concept and the steps are basically the same. So on the left side is the raw data, the source is on top, and the first chart is the standard Excel output. Then below is the chart that I show inside the slides. Okay, so basically what you will do, right, is that you will select the data that you want to put inside your chart. So if you look at it, there's 4 different columns. Firstly, you have your year, and then your GDP per capita, and then that growth rate. So what you'll do is to select that variables that you want first, basically. So you select your year. So if I use my keyboard, I'll just press Shift, Control, and down arrow key to select all the way down. Then the next one will be your GDP per capita. So now you highlight these 2 columns first. You all try to follow along and do along also. Okay, then you'll go to the top where you'll see insert. You just click insert. Then you can click on the chart that you want. So usually I'll just press this that arrow at the corner. And then now you can see that they suggest like different options. So whether it's a line chart or area chart and so on. So what you will do is to click on line chart. Let me move this below. Oh, oops. Okay, so now this is the chart that I've gotten out, right? So how do I get from this into this? So the first step that I will do, right, is to click on this plus arrow sign. Then I'll remove the grid lines. And then after which I'm going to I'll left click on the bottom axis first. And then I right click. And I click format axis. So once you do that, then there'll be a new window on the right side. So I'll just go inside this format axis. And then what you will do, right, is that, so you'll notice that from this, right, it starts from 2021 until 1960. So I need to reverse that order to start from 1960 until 2021. So you just click into this checkbox. So now straight away, your axis, it will flip from earliest to latest instead of the other way around. And then now you'll see that they have basically take every single year all the way. So it's going to be very messy and it's very unreadable. So what you will then do next, right, is to change that interval value. And you'll go to tick marks. And then basically now is every 1 year, right? So you'll change to 10 years. Why does it not move? Oh, sorry, it should be labels where you change the interval unit to 10 years. So once you do that, then the bottom will straight away change from 1961 then you'll change from 1961, 71, and so on. So now we are roughly settled for that x-axis part. Then now you're going to adjust the other parts. So you'll notice that for this, right, the font color, right, is actually gray color in terms of the axis, labels, chart title, and so on. So what I prefer to do, right, is to change the font color to black instead of gray, because black is much more visible compared to gray. So it's easier on the eyes when you look at the chart. Because if you are going to read a gray color font, right, it's going to be very straining on your eyes. And you need to look at it harder, right, in order to read the text at the back. And then now I'll change the chart title to say that. So in terms of your chart titles and your slide titles and so on, right, the title is very important because it tells the reader, right, what is the main takeaway of this chart. Samuel, maybe you want to try. What would be your first instinctive title to this chart? Okay, so basically you are telling me what the chart is about, but you're not telling me what is the takeaway from this chart. Is the so what of this chart. So for example, right, earlier in the slide I showed that revenue by year. Technically it's not wrong, right? I'm showing you the revenue by year, but what is the underlying message that I'm trying to tell you is that there's strong revenue growth. So that should be the main takeaway, the so-called the so what of that chart. So your chart title, right, should always be that so what. So a good way to put this, right, is that you can say that Singapore has undergone astounding GDP growth since inception, for example. So straight away, right, the reader will understand that Singapore has grown a lot. Instead of you just saying Singapore GDP by year, and then you leave it up to them to draw the conclusion. So you always want to tell them the answer, so-called the answer in your chart at the very first line that they read. So after this, then what you will do, right, is to change the chart color to make it whatever color that you want to be. So you just click on the values over here, like the line chart, and then you right click. Then for outline, you can just press the blue color that you want. Then you will change to that particular shade of blue or whatever color theme that you guys choose basically. So the other thing that I've done, right, is to adjust the axis labels. So you'll notice that on the right side, there's this currency symbol, right? And the reason is because the raw data, right, is actually in terms of currency over here. So that's why on the axis labels, right, you'll follow the same format. But there's actually no need to do it in such a way where you show like the dollar sign and then like how many thousands and so on. So for this, right, if you scroll up a bit, you can look at this cell. Then there's already a format that I input over here. So just go inside, you just copy and paste. So you copy, then you click on this axis, then you right click and then you click format axis. Then now you just scroll down to number. And then over here, right, you can actually customize what format you want to use. So whether it's a currency or number or percentage and so on. So I'll just edit the format that I've selected. So I'll just go to custom. Then now I can type whatever I want inside here. So I'll just paste it back in. So basically, I just pasted this line to this box. So once you paste it in, right, you just click add. Then you notice that you have removed the currency symbols and so on. And then what I will do next, right, is to adjust it from actual numbers to thousands. So for that, you'll need to go to let me try to find it. Oh yeah, so it's over here in terms of the axis options. So you click on axis options first, right? Then there'll be this drop down list of items. Then you go down, there'll be this display units. So if it's none, right, you'll show the actual values, basically the same as your raw data. Then what you'll do is to click on the arrow, and they will show you like hundreds, thousands, and so on. So just click on thousands. So now you see that on the axis, right, it will change to thousands. You all manage to catch that? That side okay? The rest of you all managed to catch that for teams 2 and 3. Yeah, so once you do that, right, you will straight away adjust the unit type, whether it's like actual or thousands and so on. Then I can just you can either remove these thousands or you can leave it there, but I'll just remove it. Then I'll just make a edit to the title to make it Sing dollars thousands. And then the last step is to remove the outline of the entire chart. So you just click on the chart, right click, then you click on outline, then you click no outline. So now it will look like a very clean chart. So this is how you get from the first chart to this final output. So it's just a few steps that you need to take in order to make it look more presentable, basically. Everyone able to get to the same result over here? Oh yeah. So I think you can just adjust the font size and all that. I won't go into that. It's quite simple. But everyone managed to get to the same output. The Mac users, you're okay? Or you got different setting or whatnot? Everyone okay? Yes. What do you mean?
Let's see now. Let's say I did download it. Wait. So this is the new one. I downloaded today. Then I will here. Okay, the left side no lah. The left side my back I some new lah. Windows you know, but here I can see. No, I basically you very you can transform. I'm going to use it for a while. Yeah, well, I can find out, but the number
Okay, I'll move on to the second and the third chart.
being transfer over by the for me, I like to fix like that. We can like it.
You all ready for me to continue? Okay, so the next one is just the GDP by country chart. So same thing, right? The left side is the standard default chart. Then the right side is what I've edited. So I'll just show you guys what I've done to get to the second chart. So same thing, right? What's the first step that you need to do for the chart? To generate the chart. Yeah, so basically for this, I'll just select over here. And then GDP over here. Then I'll go to insert. And so you'll see that they straight away give me this as the default suggestion. So I'll just change it to bar. Okay, so now there's a bar, right? So Samuel, what's the next step that I'll do after I get this bar chart out? Okay. So for this, to change the color, right, I'll just click on any one of the bars. Then right click to get the fill. Then I'll change to whatever color that I want. So let's say I use a light blue. Then now I want to highlight the Singapore bar. So in order to do that, right, I have to click into the Singapore bar. So I'll click on the Singapore bar by itself. So now you can see that it's just that bar that is being selected. Then I'll change the color for that. Okay, so now out of all the bars, right, all of them are light blue, but Singapore is dark blue. Then what's the next step? Alvin. Horizontal axis. You mean this one? Okay, then what do I do with it? Okay. Labels, okay.
Gotcha.
Or the display.
Yeah, this thing is 2000.
Okay.
We just change to
You can change the
Okay. Okay, and then what next? So for this, right, you can, if you want to insert data labels for everything, right, what you will do is to click on the plus sign, then you will check the data labels box. But if you want to just call out the data label for one particular item, right, then what you will do is to click on that item, then right click and just put add data label to get the value call. So that's what you will do for your data labels. Then what's remaining, right, is just to change the font color to black, then remove the outline for this entire chart, then put a meaningful title. Okay, so actually you are actually done with this chart on the in the center over here. So that's for our second chart. So let's go ahead to our third chart. Oh yeah, something else that I haven't mentioned for this third chart, right, is that if you look at the original chart, the data was shown for 6 years, whereas for the edited chart, right, it was shown for 5 years. So the reason why, right, is that if you try to show the numbers, right, for 6 years, right, it's not very common for finance because you don't really compare for a 6-year period. You compare for either 2 years, 3 years, or 5 years. And that's the common time frame for comparison. So it's like either 2, 3, 5, or 10 years. But you won't do for 6 years. It's a very weird number. So actually, if you look at it on the left, right, that's all the raw data that was given for the past 6 years, and then revenue, gross, EBITDA, EBIT, and net. So what I did for the second chart, right, is to remove the items that I don't actually intend to use. So firstly, right, 2017 is all removed. So I start from 2018. And then from 2018, right, it's just for 19, 20, 21, 22. And then I'll just select the variables that I want to display. So firstly, I'll start from revenue, then gross margin and net margin. So the actual numbers for the revenue, right, I just link it to the raw data. And then for the gross margin and net margin, right, I use the raw data to calculate what is the margin given the original data source. So I'll just do this for all the different variables over here. You all can see the values yourself. So once you are done with this, right, then you can start to plot your chart. So actually, if you notice over here, right, I start from 2018 and I reference back to 2018 cell. Does anyone know how to get the FY in front of the 2018? Ryan, how do you get the FY in front of the 2018? Because if you look at the cell, right, I reference back to D6, and D6 there's no FY in front. So how come the C13 there's a FY in front? How do you get that FY in front? Okay. So basically what I've done for this FY, right, is that you will go to, on your home page, right, there's this number format. You'll click on the arrow at the bottom corner. And now they'll ask you what is your format that you want. So usually it'll be like a number or currency first. Then you click into custom, right? Then you manually edit the format. So for example, right, for 2018, right, I can just put FY. So you put the open inverted commas first, then you type FY, then you close inverted commas, then followed by just 10 to show that the number is displayed as is. Or if you want, you can put a A behind. To show that it's an actual value. So now you can see that this one is called FY 2018A. You can just do it for one cell, and then you just copy. So just Control C. Then for the rest of the years, right, you can just paste as a format. I'm not sure about Mac, what's the paste special command. You can go and Google or figure it out. But for Windows, it's just Alt ES. So you just Alt ES, then you press T for formats. So once I press enter, right, the A will appear for all of the other 4 years. So I'll press enter, and the A will be appearing at the back. Wow, the wire got problem. Okay, so now that I've gotten all of these out, right, what I will do is to highlight all my data source. Okay, so I'll highlight all my data source. And then I will press insert chart. So now you can see that there's this clustered column or whatever. So it's actually a combo chart. So I want to change the chart type. So I'll click on all charts, then go to combo. And then over here, right, what I will do is to change the secondary axis. So for example, revenue is a clustered column. Then gross margin will be line. Then I'll click secondary axis to get the right-hand side axis to appear. So now you can see that this is the setting that I'll need to use in order for me to get the chart on the right side. Then I'll just click OK. Then this chart will come out. So once I got this chart out, right, the bulk of the work is done already. It's just to change some of the settings to get to the one on the right side. So basically what I will do next, right, is to right click the chart, remove the outline, font color black, remove the grid lines, change the fill color, and then change the line, the color of the line. And then if you notice, right, the so-called so if you notice, right, the line width, right, is actually different from the new chart and the original chart. So what you can do, right, to make it look better, right, because this chart, right, this line is quite thick, it's a bit ugly, yeah. So make it thinner a bit. So just right click, outline, then you go to weight. So the weight, you can choose the width of the line. So whether it's like 0.6 or 1 point or 1.5, it's up to you. Usually I'll recommend between 1, 1.5 or 2. But usually I'll just put either 1 or 1.5 as the more aesthetic one. Then now you just repeat the same for the second line. So for those that are using Windows, right, in order to repeat the last action, right, you just press F4. It should work, but I think my com got problem already. Okay, so now, right, all we need to do, right, is to just adjust the axis labels on the left and the right, and to call out the percentage. So actually for this, right, what we are trying to show, right, is that the margins are declining on a year-on-year basis. But then you might not want to show the values for all of the years. So you just want to show the first year and the last year. So you just click on the value over here. You right click, then you add data label. Then you can just reposition this to the top. Then you just repeat for the last year. Okay, so now I've got the data labels for the first and the last year. So I'll just do it again for the net margin for 2018 and 2022. Then I'll just adjust the axis for the left side and the right side for the percentage. Then once we are done with that, then it's actually completed already. Okay. Anyone got any questions so far? Yes. Sorry for those Mac users, but the harsh truth, right, is that when you go to office, right, the default computer that's given to you is a Windows. So it's either you download Parallels or you get yourself familiarized with Windows, right? But honestly, when you go to work, right, no one uses Mac for work one. Yeah, so you need to learn how to use Windows.
Stay on the website.
But in the meantime, you can just go and Google how to use your Mac or how to get those settings. But I can't really help you guys for Mac users. So I think now we have finished the first part. I think we can take a break. We come back at 11:50. Then we'll start with the revision questions for this year part. Which one? So it's a good comment class. This one.
Yeah, one mask.
So you want parallel to Windows?
I can have Okay, I think we can continue with the second part of the lesson. So actually for this, right, it's more on some valuation questions. So actually for the previous lesson, I think only a few people attended, right? What was it again? Okay. You all haven't seen the questions before, right? Okay. Team one, you all ready to continue?
I think.
Okay, I mean, apart from Chelsea. Yeah, okay. So actually for the last lesson that Ezekiel taught on the DCF part of the model, after that, did anyone like revise the content that was taught to you guys or like run through again or what? Cause last lesson only like 5 people came, then the rest, did you all like catch up after the lesson ended? Like from Ezekiel's lesson until today, there's about 2 weeks in between. Did anyone review or revise the lesson materials? Wei is saying no. Then the rest also no. Anyone went to look back at the lesson slides from Ezekiel's lesson? Yeah. Okay. The rest say? No. Okay. I suggest you guys go and look back at the lesson because it's quite important. I know that no one has looked at it, but I hope that you guys can go and look at it. Okay. Okay, so now we just run through some discussion questions. So the first one, try not to use your calculator. It's just simple math. So given all those points, right, what is the EV beta? How will you guys proceed to solve this question? So I give you the interest expense, net income, cash, EBITDA, cost of debt, and your PE. You can take your cost of debt as your interest rate that you are paying. So how will you get to your EV EBITDA? So I give you your EBITDA value, right, $50. So to get to your EV EBITDA, what is the other variable that you need to get? That's the first question first. Susie, what do you need to get to calculate your EV EBITDA? Sorry? What? Yeah, okay. So can someone tell me like how to get to your EV given the other variables on top? Okay. But how do you get to it?
So, say one, so the cash is.
Okay, so basically what you have now, right, is okay. So can someone tell me like what is the equity value of this company? You just need two variables. Okay, so your EQD, right, is equals to your PE times net income, which is basically how much? 25 times 20, which is 500. Okay, so now your equity value is 500. So how do you get from equity value to enterprise value? Okay, so basically your plus debt minus cash.
Based on my research, I think cash is 100.
Okay, so your cash is 100. And what about your debt? So how do you get your debt? your interest rate is 10%. No, it's just simple math. Giovanna, what is the amount of debt?
Your interest rate is 10%. Your interest expense is 10% is what?
200. Okay. So basically your debt, right? I given you interest of 20, mean interest expense, then the interest rate is 10%. So basically given your 20 bucks, right? You can work backwards and calculate your debt to be 200. Okay, so now your EQB is 500. And then you take your plus 200 minus 100. So your enterprise value is 600. So now you got your enterprise value. What is your EV/EBITDA? Yeah, so your EV/EBITDA is just take 600 over 50 equals to 12 times EV/EBITDA. Okay, so that's how you derive your EV/EBITDA of 12 times given the above variables. So you need to look at all of these, right, and figure out how to. Firstly, you need to figure out what variables you need to get to your EV/EBITDA. So fundamentally is you get your EBITDA value and your EV value. So EBITDA is really given as $50. So you need to ask yourself next, how to get to enterprise value. So if you see that there's net income and there's PE. So from that you can get your equity value or your market cap. Then you just move from equity value to enterprise value. So it's just basically your net debt basically. So in order to calculate that, you need to get your amount of debt. Because you have 100 bucks of cash. So just calculate your debt to be 200 bucks. You just sum it up, you could get your enterprise value and your EV/EBITDA. Anyone got any questions? No. Okay, next question. Okay, so if your unlevered beta is 1, your target DE is 0.25, tax rate 20%, what is your relevered beta? Anyone recalls what is the formula to relever your beta? Yes.
Pivot beta times 1 plus X rate, then multiplied by the target situation.
Wrong. Close enough. Okay, so very simple, like the equation is called the Hamada equation. Okay, so basically the formula is as follows, right? So your levered beta goes to your unlevered beta times, inside is quite long, so you just break it down into the different parts. So one part is 1 minus your tax rate, then this will be times debt over equity, then 1 plus this whole thing, then it goes back at. Okay, so this is the entire formula. So how do you get your relevered beta? So your 1 minus tax rate is 0.8. Your debt over equity is 0.25. So this will give you 0.2. And 1 plus 0.2 is 1.2. And then your unlevered beta is 1. So your levered beta is equals to 1.2. Once you just take 1 times 1.2. Can? Okay, third question. If your revenue CAGR is 10%, how long will it take to double your revenue?
Yes.
7.1.
7.2.
How do you know? Yeah, okay. So basically for this, right, for the rule of 72, right, it's just a quick way, right, to estimate how long will it take to double something given a certain growth rate. So the rule, right, is that you'll take 72, right, then divide by your growth rate in terms of percentage, but you ignore the percentage. So if your growth rate is 10%, right, you'll take 72 over 10. So it's like 15, you just take 72 over 15, then you get your number of years. So that's a quick way to estimate this. And maybe another question is, let's say I give you, okay, so let's say you give me $100 now. 5 years time, I give you $250. What is your IRR? Sorry? Why? Gut feel. No. Okay, so for this, right, it's just another quick way. So let's say for a 5-year period, right, then you will calculate what is your money on money or cash on cash or money on invested capital. It's all the same thing basically. So let's say over here is your IRR. Over here is your money on money. So if let's say it's a 2 times or 2.5 times or 3 times, your IRR over a 5-year period for 2.5 times is about 20%. For 2 times is about 15%. For 3 times about 25%. So that's just a quick rule of thumb, right, to estimate what is your rate of return given your money multiple. But this one probably you all won't use it, but it's just a quick way for you to estimate. Okay, next question. What are the 3 ways to increase the value of a business? So how do you increase your valuation of a business? Anyone? What can you do to increase the value of your business? Yes.
Inorganic M&A.
Okay. Sure. What are some other ways? Okay, that's one of the ways. Let's say over 1 year lah. Yeah. I mean, don't need to be very specific, but how do you increase the value of the business? Why are they all staring at me? Not really. Okay, so in general, right, what you need to think of, right, like what Mr. has mentioned, your FCFS formula, or you can think in terms of your multiple formula. So the first way, right, is to have revenue growth. So if you grow your top line, right, all other things being constant, like your margin and all that, your value of the business will grow because your everything else will grow, like your EBITDA or net income, all this will grow in line with your revenue growth. And then secondly, right, is to have margin improvement. Okay, so assuming that you don't grow your revenue, right, but your margins improve. So if let's say I tell you that this year, right, your revenue is 1 million, your EBITDA margin is 50%, and I give you 10 times EBITDA as your valuation. So based on this, right, currently, right, your valuation is about 5 million because you take 500K times 10. But for next year, right, assuming that your revenue and your multiple still remain constant, right, then the only way to increase your value, right, is to improve your margins. So let's say you increase your EBITDA margin to 60%. Then because of that, right, your business will grow in value from 5 million to 6 million. Just because you are more efficient in running the business. Okay, and then another way is to have multiple expansion. Okay, so for this, right, if let's say your EBITDA maintains at 500K, but now the market is improving, and instead of 10 times EBITDA, I give you 11 times. So even if you do nothing, right, your business, right, is still increase on value from 5 million to 5.5 million, simply because your multiple improved. So this multiple expansion, right, is actually a key thing when you look at the business. What is the multiple? Because if you go up or go down, right, will actually make quite a big difference to your company. So let's say you think that this company is worth 8 times, but I say that it's actually only worth 7 times. So that 1 times, right, is actually quite a big difference to your company's valuation. And the other ways that you can use is is to have working capital or capex efficiency. Okay, so basically what is this one is that you're going to reduce your capex, right, to only the bare minimum that's needed to sustain the business. So it's more of maintenance capex rather than growth capex. Because if you reduce your capex, right, for your free cash flow formula, right, it will actually increase your free cash flow to the firm. And same thing for working capital. So the thing is that a lot of companies, right, they will focus a lot on the P&L, but they neglect the balance sheet or the working capital. That's why some companies that their working capital policy is quite poor. So they will always try to tighten the working cap policy, right, to basically to squeeze more cash out of the business instead of like trying to stockpile inventory or that. They'll make it like a very lean inventory system in order to maximize the value of the business. And another way is to use leverage to increase the value of the business. So basically, they don't really use shareholders' money or investment, but they use that in order to run the business, in order to generate returns for the equity holders. So these are the main ways that people use to increase the value of the business.
Actually, right, it's not, I think there's so how does acquire let's say you acquire share, which share because the various business segments will take time to generate business.
Let's say I pay cash for business. I paid full cash 100% to acquire a business. Will it show you that? So basically the company acquire a company, I need to I pay cash. So if I pay 1.5 that is going to be so the company is I acquire what so this is the common the equity value is by pay 100% and price.
Okay, so fifth question. Assume that your annual return on invested capital is 20%, and then you are going to invest it for 5 years. What is the NPV of the business? Okay, let's go back to basics. Ryan, what is NPV? Yeah, so what does it mean? Okay. Okay, so given these 2 points, right, your annual return is 20%, and then you're going to hold for 5 years. What is the net present value of this business? How do you calculate given all this? Anyone got any idea? Or everyone don't know? Yes. Huh? Okay. Anyone has any suggestions?
What? I know the formula is 1.1.
Okay, so what's the MPV?
That's but the one is assuming that,
Okay.
I mean, that's the discount rate lah. So
Okay.
discount factor.
Okay. Somewhat close enough. So actually, right, this question 5, right, is a trick question because you cannot calculate the NPV, right, given these 2 variables. Because what you need, right, is your initial investment amount, whether it's like 1 million or 10 million or what. Because your NPV, right, is a dollar amount. So if I tell you that, oh, I'm going to invest in this property and I'm going to pay 1 million, and then assuming that's the returns, then you can calculate the NPV. But if I don't tell you what's the investment amount, right, you cannot calculate what's the NPV. Okay, so that's something that you should remember lah. Basically, your NPV, right, you need a dollar amount in order to get to your NPV. Okay, so assume the WACC is 20%, right? Let's say I give you 1 million for the investment. What is the IRR? Okay, so let's say I change a bit, right? I tell you that now the market is bad, right? The WACC increased to 25%. How does that affect your IRR?
Reduce, because the required return, the WACC is higher.
Okay.
Discount more. That's less.
Other people, what do you all think? Hazel? No. Susie? Okay. So congratulations. This is another trick question. Because your WACC and IR, right, it doesn't rely on the other factor. Your WACC, right, is just to get to your NPV. Where your IRR, right, it doesn't care what your WACC is. So what your IRR does, right, is to sort of like simulate what is the WACC, right, in order for your NPV to be equals to 0. So basically, right, even if your WACC is 30%, right, you calculate your IRR, right, based on the actual cash flows and not the discounted cash flows. So that's why, right, your IRR, right, it doesn't depend on what your WACC is. It depends on the actual dollar value of your returns that you get from the investment. Okay, come. Let's have a vote. Which one is better? Let's say like in general, like if you have to choose between either A or B, then who would go for A? Who say A? One. Okay, who will say B? Only one. Then the rest say C. No, this one is not a trick question, it's a legit question. Okay, maybe those that say A, explain why you think A is better.
Popularity for
Okay.
like they order the bills, they order the oil.
Okay.
That's one.
Then the rest, you all agree with what Alvin said, or you have your separate reasons? Okay, then why you say B? Okay.
Specifically McDonald's as for this investment right?
Yeah.
Because of that, you which is quite different from them as compared to why I want
to support investment.
Yes, correct. So when you write your thesis, right, the trick is to be as specific as possible and not to rely too much, right, on all these macro factors. For example, fast food. Because if you say, oh, fast food is good, right, then fundamentally, right, there's no difference between investing in McDonald's or KFC or whatever, or Burger King, because they're all fast food. But you wanted to try to pinpoint your specific investment merits to one part of your target company. So for example, like McFish, then you pinpoint it to this particular product release or whatever area of that fast food segment that they are targeting. So that's what you should try to do to make a better thesis. For example, instead of saying fast food, because that applies to the entire industry, you try to be more specific and point to a particular product or whatever action that they are trying to implement. Okay, so A. So question 8, A or B?
A.
Who say A? The rest? Oh, okay. Read first. Okay, who say A? Wow. Who say B? Okay. Oh, trick question. Why? So what is C? Okay. Maybe those that say, maybe Suli can explain why you say A. Okay. But do you know what is FIFA?
Yeah.
Okay, so it somewhat linked back to question 7, like where we try to be more specific. But in this case, right, there's no need to be so specific that hey, FIFA is the World Cup is the largest sporting event, because this is a commonly known fact, or most people would know that hey, the World Cup is so popular, it's only once every 4 years. So there's no need to go into so much detail about something. So what you're trying to say, right, is that because they sponsor this event, they are going to have a lot of advertisement and all that stuff. So basically you can use B, right, to say that they are well positioned to benefit from their sponsorship of the World Cup, instead of trying to explain so long, because there's no need to write such a long grandmother story, right, to bring across your point. So it's try to be specific, but at the same time also concise. Yeah, so it's about thinking how to allocate your resources and thinking about what is really important to your thesis. Next one. A or B?
B.
B. Anyone say A? Recall what I say for question 8, try to make it concise, but A is shorter than B. Why A?
B is specific, right? But you cannot compare. Maybe 10 billion is more in the market.
Okay.
But maybe market is like 10 billion, 10 billion doesn't make sense. But
Sure.
if you say it opens new market, right? Saying that there's a first mover advantage, you will generate a large market share regardless of the size.
Sure, you have a point. So actually for this question 9, right, the main point, right, is to be specific and to quantify, because you always want to be specific and also quantify the impact of whatever actions, right, on the business. So you might say that, oh, you can't really put a value to it because it's still a very new market. But even if you can't do it, you try your best to put a dollar value to it and what's the impact on the business. Because A, right, anyone can write this, but B, right, you need to be sort of you need to do some studies in order to say that it's 10 billion or whatever dollar amount. So when you quantify it, then it brings more credibility to your entire statement. And then you can say that because of this, right, the revenue will increase by 5% or whatever. Instead of saying that, oh, they will open new markets, then straight away people will ask you, So what's the impact? It's always about the so what. So if you don't say any dollar amount, then you can't quantify and you can't really give a convincing answer to the so what. So that's what question 9 is about. So when you look at 7, 8, and 9, right, there are 3 main points that I'm trying to bring across to you guys. So basically, the first one is always to be specific, not to use like overarching sort of macro or industry points for your thesis. And secondly is to be concise when you write your thesis, don't write too long. And thirdly is to always quantify your points and back it up with credible sources, basically. Okay, so for next one, how do people hide debt on their balance sheet? What are some creative ways that you can use to show people that, hey, actually, we have no debt? How do you do it? Let's say like you look at the balance sheet, right? Then you look for current portion of debt, non-current portion of debt. But then they can use other ways to sort of hide this amount. So how do you know? Or suddenly Googling, how do I hide debt on my balance sheet? How to commit fraud? Anyone got any suggestions or ideas? Yeah, I think I last tell you guys the answer. So if you think about it, like your balance sheet, actually, if you notice that there'll be this thing called right of use assets and these liabilities. So that's a very common way to use that to sort of like hide debt basically. So the whole idea, right, is that, for example, right, if I have like 1 million of PPE, then what I will do, right, is that I will enter into a sales and leaseback agreement. So I will sell you the PPE for 1 million, then I'll lease it back from you with an interest rate. So for example, right, I will sell this thing to you for 1 million, then I'll get the cash. So it's actually what I'm trying to do, right, is I'm trying to borrow money, but I cannot borrow money. So I sell you my equipment, then you give me money. Then every month I'll pay you a certain interest rate. Like example, I'll pay you like 150K for this every month over 1 year. So actually I'm paying interest on that also. So actually that's another way that companies use to sort of like hide debt, or if they are in distress or they max out their credit limit, then they will resort to all these, right, to raise cash for the company. So to whoever you are leasing it back from. So there are some companies, right, that they specialize in all these finance leasing. So it's called a sales and leaseback agreement or structure. So they will use this, right, and use their fixed assets, right, to actually sort of sell it off to get cash for the business without borrowing from the banks and without it being classified as a bank loan or term loan or something along these lines. Yeah, because he's buying that from you, right?
Yeah, you buy the.
Yeah, and then but you still need to use that PPE, like your machine. You need your machine to run the business. So instead of owning that PPE, right, you will lease it from him. So because you sold to him, he owns the PPE. So now I say, okay, now you want to use, right? Okay, I lease it to you. Then every month you pay me a lease expense. But inside that lease expense, right, is technically you are paying your debt, basically, because you borrow that money.
It's actually an expense.
Yeah.
Because it has expense, but
yeah.
It's the asset. Sell
because it's a right of use asset, it's a lease asset. So you can use like all these sales and leaseback or hire purchase agreement to get extra cash for your business. So technically, like if you are doing this, right, if let's say you use like a hire purchase agreement, right? Technically, you don't own the asset because it's not your asset. It belongs to him, just like he lends you the asset to use in a sense. Yeah, so the ownership of these assets, right, it doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the owner of these assets, unless you have an agreement that says like after you pay all this for 1 year, then the ownership will transfer to you. Then in that case, right, then you have a claim to the asset in the future. And that depends on whether you are paying off all your expenses in that 1 year. And then another way that they can do it is to use like shareholder loans, for example, or they can use or it may not be exactly that, but it's more of liabilities that might not be covered in the balance sheet. So for example, like when you borrow money from the bank, right, they will always ask you for a guarantee. So for business, right, there will be both personal guarantee and corporate guarantee. So what it means, right, is that if let's say Hazel Private Limited should borrow money from the bank, then the bank will ask her, hey, Hazel, you're the CEO, can you sign on this loan agreement to guarantee that if your company don't pay you back, I will sue you until you are bankrupt to get my money back. Then she said, right, she have to sign. Then she sign in her own name, like Miss Hazel Ang, and not Hazel Private Limited, in order to sort of guarantee that that loans. So some business, like their subsidiaries will borrow the amount or their JV or whatever, then they will actually sign on that agreement, right, to guarantee as a corporate guarantee. So if let's say, right, Alvin Private Limited, he borrow 1 million from the bank, then he asked Wei, hey, Wei, can you sign for me? Then Wei sign, Wei Private Limited. No, they are not even related to him, but you sign for him. So technically, right, you don't need to file that amount, right, under your balance sheet. But let's say, right, Alvin, he default, right, then the bank will look for Wei Private Limited, right, to claim back that 1 million because you are the corporate guarantee. You have guaranteed that amount, right, based on your signature. Yeah, so it depends on. So in this case, right, there's no need for you to declare that 1 million in Wei Private Limited's balance sheet. But if Alvin default, then Wei is liable. So actually, right, you need to also look for whether they are the guarantors for any loans, because if it goes wrong, right, then they are going to bear the liability of that bad loan, basically. So that's another thing to look out for. Not really, but some companies, like they might, although they are not technically related or they don't consolidate their financials, but they can also use that to sign. So for example, like some companies, like the director, he have like 2 companies, like A and B. Then A borrow money, then they'll need another guarantor. So he used B to sign for A. So in that sense, right, if you, let's say you invest into B, right, you don't know about it, right, then next year, right, A default, right, then suddenly the bank will look for you and say, hey, you have guaranteed this loan, please pay it back. Then you know that you are screwed. Yeah, so that's another area to look for, whether is there any like are they acting as a guarantor for a loan or something along these lines.
Borrow money without.
No, but the money that A borrow, right, goes to A.
Yeah,
So
it's just that they are liable for it.
But if A gives the money to
Oh, then that will be recorded in your balance sheet.
Oh.
Yeah, just that in some case, right, if you invest in a company, right, they might have like liabilities that is sort of like not recorded in the balance sheet. In this case, if you are like guarantor for another company's loans, so they should be declaring that by right. And another way is a contingent liability, where let's say they enter into a contract, right, and then they say that if let's say this year you don't produce 10 million units, then I'm going to sue you for that amount of difference. But that will only be a liability, right, if they never perform that action in the contract. So that's a contingent liability. So in that case, right, it can be considered a liability, but sometimes they will not reflect that amount inside the balance sheet. So that's like something else to take note of. I don't know if you guys can recall this from last sem, but let's try to figure this out. Anyone can remember this or not? I don't forget already. Very good, very good. Forget is good. Okay, so now there's 2 things, right? So basically at first, right, they have 6.4 billion revenue, and then they are trading at 0.16 times EV revenue. Then 1 year later, right, their revenue is 5.1 billion, but now they are valued at 2.6 times EV revenue. So how can How can this happen? Okay, sure. Hey, you know, then better shut up. I tell you. Okay, so year one. Let's say year one in year two. Revenue is what? 6.4, 5.1. EV revenue is 0.16x, 2.68x. Okay, so what's the EV based on this? Equals what?
Wait, my is cooking or what? One.
1.024. Year one.
1.024. Okay. Year two? 13.668. Okay, so based on this, right, what are some ways that you think that this could have happened for the EV to go up by that much and like the multiple is going up as well?
Mainly because you took on more debt.
Okay. Okay, so let's do a simple math, right? What's the difference?
The difference of
12.66444.
4.
So it's basically increase of 12.6 billion. So what Kishore has said is that they have borrowed 12 billion of that in order to increase the EV from 1 billion to 13 billion. So that's one way, right? You borrow 12 billion. What's another way to increase the enterprise value? Okay. So the share price has gone up by 13 times over 1 year. Okay, so do you think it's realistic from what Kisong and Dawei said to borrow another 12 billion of our share price to go up 13 times in 1 year? No? Why not? Why do you think both of these are not realistic? Suzy, what do you think? Is it realistic for this to happen? Okay. Okay, so in terms of, let's say I tell you, right, they raised 12 billion of that. Why do you think is, do you say it's realistic or unrealistic to borrow 12 billion? Why? On what basis? Sorry? But some companies, 12 billion to them is nothing. So how do you get a basis for that? You say 12 billion is too much. And so you say 12 billion is too much. So how much is too much? 11, is it okay? 11.99?
For year one is
Okay. So basically, a way to think about that is that whether it's realistic, like to borrow this much in comparison to your revenue of 6.4. So essentially you are borrowing 2 years worth of revenue, which no one will lend you that much basically. So it's based on this, you can say that it's unrealistic. But again, it can be made the case that it can be realistic, like if let's say they are going to expand. But if you look at it, the revenue has declined by 1.3 billion in 1 year. So if you say that, oh, they need more capital because they are growing company, then if you look at the numbers, like one look, you know that is not growing because it's basically declined. So the other side is that you have increased your market cap by 13 times. So why do you think it's not realistic? try to think like realistically, like logically. It's not so much about the math, I would say, or the technical part. It's more of like how to apply it and use your own judgment. Why? Okay, so basically what Sui is saying is that in order for it to justify increase in the share price, right, the underlying metrics should also improve. For example, like net income or EBITDA and so on, assuming the multiple stays the same lah. And that's true. So if you look at it, like, if the revenue is declining, right, it's highly unlikely that if like, for example, like you see the company or the shareholders, you see that it declined by basically about 1.3 billion, and they are willing to increase the valuation by so much when your top line is dropping. So your sales growth, right, is always an important factor because that will affect your dollar value of net income, EBITDA, and so on. So based on this, right, it's quite unlikely that even if they decrease the revenue, their EBITDA or net income can actually increase by that much more. So based on this, right, it's quite unlikely. So another possibility is for them to have a combination of both of these, where they borrow, let's say, 6 billion, and the share price increased by 6 times. You get a total increase of 12 billion in the enterprise value. And that's also another possibility. But if you look at it, right, based on this, right, it's quite unlikely for this to happen. So can anyone suggest any other ways, right, for this to happen in 1 year? Okay, so they use up their cash, and then it will increase the enterprise value. How does that work?
Because it's your value plus debt minus cash money. Right? If your cash increase, then
Okay, sure. That is also another possible method. Okay, so now that we have looked at all of these, right, who thinks that this is a real case? Who thinks that this is a fake case? Then the rest,
I will assume it's a big case
until proven otherwise. Sorry? Yeah, that means the equity value can go up 13 times. Okay, so based on this, right, you assume that it's highly unlikely, but this is actually a real case. It's called GameStop. So if you go to CapIQ and look at the multiples, right, it's actually, these are the real numbers. I go there and just plug it out. I just plug out these two metrics so we can discuss about this. So the underlying lesson I'm trying to teach you guys, right, is that firstly, right, the market can be quite irrational. So the market can be irrational longer than you can remain solvent. So it's something to always remember when you do your own investments. And secondly, right, is that when you screen for comps, right, always look out for outliers. So in this case, right, you see that this is probably an outlier, given the high multiple. So when you look for your comps and look at the multiples, like always try to look for and eliminate those with outlier multiples or those that are too low or too high, because it's going to give you a skewed picture of what the market really is like. Okay, and then the third thing is that some of the companies' prices and multiples, like it doesn't rely on your fundamentals. So don't just think about this plus this equals this. Try to look at things from different perspective, from a non-financial perspective as well, in order to understand what really happens and to be as practical and realistic as possible, basically. Okay, question 12. That's the second last question. How does leverage affect the value of a business? Is it good or bad? Who say that it's good? Raise hand. One only. Two. Who said that it's bad? No one. Then the rest, what do you think? I don't know.
I think it will raise the value of the business, but based on too much effect.
Okay. So actually the sort of like the short answer, right, is that it depends on whether it's good or bad. Because you have to look at the industry, what is the normal amount of debt to have in that particular industry or business segment, and then whether your company specifically, right, is able to meet the requirements of debt servicing. So let's say your company has better margins and cash flows, then sure, you can afford a higher amount of leverage. But if your company is not performing so well, right, then you can't afford to have that amount of debt in your business because you can't keep up with your interest and principal repayments. So it's always to remember to take into context what is the overall business or the industry, like what are the requirements. Like some are more capital intensive, like those industrials and so on. So they'll need more debt. But again, it depends on what is a reasonable range or the usual range that you will be able to sort of justify that, whether it's too much or too low or just nice. Okay, so before we move on to the last question, anyone got anything to clarify so far?
Increase the value of business,
Okay. So if you think about it, right, different industries, right, they have different multiples. So let's say your tech and your industrials or oil and gas, they all have different multiples. So if let's say you pivot your business to a different, more expensive industry, then your multiple also increase. But again, you can't right off the bat and say that, oh, today I changed to tech company, so my EV should increase by 10 times. It doesn't work that way. So another way is to look at the other areas of the business. So for example, your customer retention rate, your recurring revenue, your cash flow, your free cash flow conversion, and so on. So if all this, right, is better than the peers, right, you can make a case that your multiple, right, should be higher than theirs because you're all in the same business, but your performance is better than theirs. So in that case, right, you can make a you can justify how you are able to sort of demand a premium on that multiple.
You can say like number like market leaders or
Can also, but you need to think of how to quantify and justify. Like you say higher multiple, but how high is high? 0.1 times or 10 times? Sure, you can use that. Or you can look back at your historical multiples. And then next, for example, like Nike, for example. Then you look back at your historical multiples and see that historically, let's say you are trading at 10 times EBITDA. And then your standard deviation is, let's say, 1 times. And then now your trading levels is like 7.5 times EBITDA. So based on that, you can say that your historical average is 10 times. Then you plus minus 2 standard deviation, then it's 8 times. But now you're 7 times. So actually it's undervalued based on your historical valuation multiples. Yeah. So that's another way to look at it based on your company's own historical performance. Only for certain cases. For example, like you borrow money, right, but then you never record anything, then that is illegal. Or you, let's say you borrow money, but then you say that the interest rate is, let's say, 5%, but it's 10%, then that's also illegal. But if you do like sales and leaseback, hire purchase, is still legal. Yeah, so it depends on how much due diligence the investor actually carries out, basically. No, sometimes it's like you lease the equipment. It's not because you want to hide the debt, but because it's just easier to lease your equipment rather than to buy the equipment. Yeah, so you need to take into context what is the industry, like whether, and some companies, they have different policies, like some prefer to own the equipment, some prefer to rent the equipment. So it depends on what is the historical practice.
What do you like? You will see like whether they sell.
Yeah, so for example, if you look at it, right, if let's say they will sell the equipment, right, then you will see that inside the investing cash flow, right, a huge cash inflow because they sell the PPE. It's called disposal of PPE basically. So that's the hint lah. Then the other way is that you will see your fixed equipment, right, your fixed assets, right, it will decline from the PPE value. Then it will move into the ROU deadline item. So you know that basically they have transferred as from like they own to they lease. And then you can see like for these liabilities, it will also go up because there will be a corresponding entry to match the ROU assets. So those are some things that. But overall, if you look at the company, right, the cash flows and profitability is bad, right? It means they are sort of like suffering. Yeah.
If you find out that they are high debt, then like we have to increase like the liability debt numbers on our side.
Yeah, so that's why usually when you look at the capital structure, right, you will include these liabilities as part of the debt. Yeah, like your WACC, like the percentage. Yeah. Team one, any questions? No questions? So you understand everything? No. Okay. Now we move on to the last question. It's quite a fun question. No. Come, we go one round, then we say our answer. Giovanna, what's your answer? Okay, I give you all 1 minute to think. 1 minute to think about your answer. To make it simple, just exclude yourself, exclude me. Only all these onwards. Think about it.
So clear.
Can come. I'm Samuel.
I've never seen everybody.
No, I don't care. Give me your answer. I want an answer. I demand an answer. Okay, next, the way. Giovanna. Yisong, come, quick. 快点 answer
谢谢啊，这你过 EZQ 有接受吗？都接受啊，
exclude myself already.
啊，没 EZQ。
Wow, so people I see beyond and east.
What's your answer, Chelsea? I said 1. Hey, don't talk cock, just give me one answer. Okay, Ryan. Okay. Yeah, remember what you said. Now I'll up the ante.
Oh,
Think about it. Exclude yourself and exclude me also.
Oh, exclude you also.
Yeah, this one a bit fucked up, but later I'll show you all the reason why I asked you this question. Think about it. Friendship at stake. No, I'm kidding. Hey, don't take it personally. Whatever people say. Okay, now we go from the other side. Chelsea.
Based on outcomes. Best valuation.
But exclude yourself. Just say. You can say my teammates.
Yeah.
Makes it very hard.
Okay, Ryan, how about you? So what's your answer?
Right now it's 4. last year. Okay, so I'm very confident.
Okay. Susie. What's your answer? $5.
I still remember last week. I think one few. I would say probably. Oh, sure. Yeah. We all choose.
Why you think for so long one?
You see, you are everything is you know. Give us